Hello and welcome to the Bold Love Podcast with Pastor Bob Roberts Jr., where we highlight the uncommon journeys of bridge builders and peacemakers that are living out their faith in the public square by boldly loving their neighbor and working together to build resilient communities. My name is Josh Tate, and with Season 1, we want to facilitate conversations on important topics that will encourage you, the listener, to live out your faith boldly, how to better love your neighbor, and learn how to relate to others despite your differences without compromising your faith. Today, on our very first episode of Season 1, we felt it was important to talk and tell stories with Imam Mohamed Magid. He is the executive director of the Adams Center, and he's written for several online publications like the Washington Post and the Huffington Post, and even been profiled in Time Magazine and Wall Street Journal. Imam Magid's known for his multi-faith initiatives and commitment to public service and peacemaking. So today, we're going to share some stories, actually some never-before-told stories, of how Imam Magid and Pastor Bob crossed paths, their journey into bridge building, religious freedom, and really just some astounding stories of impact that these two have made across the world. We have an exciting and impressive guest list for Season 1, so as you listen today, we would love for you to subscribe and download our podcast so you don't miss any of the incredible stories told here, and even encourage you to share it with others and rate our podcast if you feel like it was impactful for you. It would really mean a lot to us, so thanks so much for doing so. Now, before we dive into this interview, I want to introduce you to the host of the Bold Love Podcast, Dr. Bob Roberts Jr. Pastor Bob, tell us a little bit about your friend, Imam Magid.
I got to tell you that Magid is one of the best friends I have on the face of the earth. I love him. I love him as much as any man I've ever known. I love him as much as my neighbor. I love him as much as any Christian I know. And that's how Jesus loves.
Yeah.
Jesus had no conditions. Now, there's some stuff about Jesus I wish he'd listen to me about, but we're just going to have to be friends anyhow. I love him because he loves his family. His 5 daughters are incredible.
Yeah.
And his wife, she's a pretty smart lady too. And she keeps him in line. I've seen it. I love him because he loves people. He does. I've watched him talk to destitute refugees, discouraged Muslims, confused Christians. He loves people. As a matter of fact, I know I'm a Christian, and this may be hard for some of you to hear and understand, but he's one of the best pictures of what it looks like to love people like Jesus of anybody I've known. I'm not saying he's a Christian. He doesn't believe in the cross. Wish he did. But he does believe in the life of Jesus and what Jesus taught and the love that he emulated. He's one of the greatest men I've ever known on the planet.
Well, Bob, I will say that anytime that we get you and Imam Magid together, it seems that there's always laughter, there's always fun, and there's always some wisdom in there as well. So I couldn't be more excited about this interview today. So without further ado, check out our interview with Imam Mohamed Magid.
Met him in Nepal, walking around a bunch of Hindu temples, looking at some crazy ancient cartoons on the edges of the buildings in Kathmandu, laughing and going, what were these people thinking? So a Christian who's conservative and a Muslim who's conservative, but we also realize that there are some real problems in the way we get along with our faith. And there's nobody like Magid who works with building bridges between the faiths. But, you know, there's some terrible things that have been said about you and me, Magid. You know, I've been accused of starting another religion. I've been accused of being a Muslim. I've been accused of not holding on to the tenets of my faith. And none of that's true. I just became friends with you.
Yeah, that's your problem. You know, it's very interesting that God is the best planner. Who have thought, and an imam from Sudan grew up in a village in the north of Sudan that you cannot see it in Sudanese map. Forget about the world map. It is not there. You cannot point to it. Was born in that village on the bank of the Nile. Come to United States now more than 3 decades. Would meet a pastor, evangelical pastor, not from Washington, D.C., not from New York, not from California, the liberal places, from Texas.
Amen.
The hard land.
Texas stand.
Yeah, hard land. And then we have heart-to-heart conversation. I think, Bob, that conversation you and I had in Nepal was amazing. I remember that we said we would like to do something about the relationship between the Christian and Muslims in a real sense, rather than just going to conferences and white paper and discussions and those kind of things.
Well, hey, can I ask you something about that?
Yeah.
What prepared you for this kind of work? Let's go back to Sudan. I want to know about that. I mean, what's the story there?
My mother passed away when I was 4 years old.
Oh, okay.
She passed away. I have a youngest brother, who's 2 years younger than me. And she after a birth of a child, she passed away during that time, and the child did not survive also. But it is that woman, I think, genes in me really made me really care about people. My father used to tell me a lot about her.
So do you remember her? Do you have any memories of her?
I have very short memory because I was 4 years old. But I remember that beautiful face, of loving and caring mother. But most of the stories about her, I heard it from my father and my older sister, God bless her soul, and my brother. But she was a very simple lady, very smart woman, but very compassionate. Her home was very wide, always open for guests. A very dedicated, smiling lady, very patient, had perseverance in life. Her life was, they grew up in a village where there's no electricity, there's no running water, but they shared everything they have. Their homes stayed open the whole day, the whole village like that. The main door when you walk into the home is not locked. If you don't like the lunch in your home, eat in the neighbor. So when you cook it,
go from house to house.
There's no cell phone. There's no privacy. My space, your space. It was so accommodating, and that is the environment I grew up in, of inclusive openness. You can walk in anyone's home and eat, and that really prepared me for this kind of work. The openness, the accessibility to people, being a people person. I see my father and my mother grew up in that environment. That really what made me who I am now today.
I've heard you tell a story about your dad and him teaching you how to serve people.
When I was serving actually the refugees in Sudan, and my father used to say that when you help people, you become a better human being. You're not doing them any favor. You cannot assume that you have done favor to somebody, because the best of you have come out. When you are loving, when you are caring, you become in touch with yourself. That discovering oneself is supposed to be the journey of every human being. What shape all of us events in life. And he was telling me that when you become in contact with an orphan, you have to remember the orphan giving you access to mercy of God. The orphan. You are not being giving them any benefit, but you are benefiting from them because you're a better human being. My father was called the smile man. Always smiling. To the extent that people said to me, I have not seen your father upset. Even when he has his pain, he has fever 105. One of the nurses screamed in Washington Hospital Center here, said, "Oh, your father's fever is so high." Well, he's not saying anything. I said, I don't know. He's just resilient.
Now, he was the Grand Mufti of Sudan.
Yes,
How
he
did
was.
that happen? Was he the imam in your local village? I'm just curious. How did?
My father graduated from the most prestigious seminary. It's called Al-Azhar.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
In
my father
Cairo.
was an Al-Azhar graduate from Egypt.
Wow.
His Islamic training from there. And he earned the highest degree of theology and Islamic law. When he came to Sudan, actually started working in a rural area, small villages. And his work was very interesting because he would preach, but also he will make sure that people have clothing, have running water, food. Like he was just doing it all. And very selfless. He would spend hours and hours walking sometimes, or riding in very tough road with very little means, so that he can help those people. And that earned him respect among the scholars in Sudan. He's a people person who will go to the villages and will take these big speakers and talk to them about morality, about loving thy neighbor, about being caring individuals. And he will go to places where maybe people have dispute, and he become peacemaker between them. If the two tribes are fighting, he will, bring peace between them, and creating like a council, peace council in those places.
Did you go with him when he would do that?
Yeah, in 2 occasions I went with him.
Did you ever get afraid or?
No, because the way he goes, that there's a legal aspect of conflict, and there's a spiritual aspect. He deals with spiritual aspect, not the legal aspect. But he's there to heal people. Healing. He come as a healer.
Yeah, Majid, I think that's amazing, and how influential your dad was, especially in the work that you're doing around the world in bridge building now. Bob, I want to ask you a question. Who was influential for you during your childhood?
My mom. I would say I was impacted more by my mom than anybody else. So by the time my mom and dad were 22, they had 4 kids.
Wow.
So you
When
do
did
the
they get
math.
married?
My mom was 17, my dad was 18 when they got married, and they started pretty quick.
That's interesting. My mother was married when she was 17.
Really?
Yeah.
So he had a lot of kids. My dad and mom, they were poor. My father pastored little churches. He was from deep East Texas, and that's our roots. And so there's a lot of prejudice in East Texas, racism and things like that. But I saw my mom as a little boy growing up, because my dad was a pastor. When people would be hungry, they'd go to the church. A lot of times my dad would send them to the parsonage. That's a house they built for the preacher to live in. And it was a small house. And I can remember my mom setting up tables and feeding poor people. And she would treat them with such respect, Majid. I mean, these are people, they hadn't bathed for days. They stunk.
Wow.
They were dirty. And yet she would talk to them with respect and kindness. But it's interesting watching my mom, how she would love people, serve people, teach us how to do that. Now, my dad taught me the Bible, and my dad taught me how to work. And so my dad was constantly in the community, serving people, preaching, doing the things that a pastor did. So I would see that. In East Texas, we don't understand in America the term tribes. But the truth of the matter is East Texas has all these villages. I call them small towns. But you would understand, Majid, they're really villages. Moving from one village to the next was very difficult. So I would see my parents serve, but I would see them also move to a different village. And so my brothers and sisters never really felt accepted in those villages. So we would have to learn to break into the school. And so that's what forced me to become friends with anybody and everybody. But we were still in all of those villages. We didn't treat African Americans right. We didn't think about them right. And we definitely didn't think about the world. The world for us was something we sent people who wanted to live overseas to evangelize other people. We didn't know other cultures, didn't respect other cultures, didn't care about other cultures. We just wanted people to become Christians. And so there was, as a Christian, that may sound good in one way, but the reality is the way we did it showed a massive disrespect for other people.
But you went to the whole white school. There's no people.
We did, but incredible story. When I was in the second grade is when they desegregated. So there was a little boy from the orphanage who was African American. So he was put in my classroom. But in the second grade, they put him next to the guy alphabetically, and his parents threw a fit. So she put him 3 places, and each parent got really upset. So finally, the principal called my mom and said, look, would you be willing, I know your husband is a pastor, would you be willing to let this black boy sit by Bobby Jean? That's my name, Magid.
Wow.
Everybody call me Bobby Jean. So my mom said, of course. Well, to me, it wasn't something bad. I was in the second grade. I was going to get to sit by the black kid. All right. I ran that kid crazy. I feel sorry for him. Looking back. I mean, imagine. Okay, don't get mad at me.
I can imagine that.
We would get in trouble because we'd start laughing. I mean, there was all kind of crazy stuff that we did. So it was a journey for me too, Magid. How do you love other people? How do you respect them?
You know, it's very interesting that, first of all, I still, sometimes I think about it, that you and I are having this conversation, and each one of us can look back and to see what are kind of events really in our childhood, our youth, really shaped us. Yeah. And what are the things that we were resisting in our heart, but you couldn't maybe verbalize it, we're resisting in our heart, that now we can talk about freely, openly and this kind of thing. Because sometimes you might have questions, in your journey, and to say, what this is all about, why this conflict is still taking place and so forth and so on. But when you become now an imam, become a pastor, now you have influence. Then you can say, okay, now I have influence. What can I do with this influence? It's very interesting that that sometimes we don't know even what we say, how many people that may impact those people. Even just a sermon, you might either go south or go north.
You have bad sermons, Magid?
Well, no, I'm saying to you that I've become more aware. Like, for example, you might say something that, and you don't realize that people sitting before you, it triggered them. You might say something that triggers somebody. The access to people and speaking to them is very powerful. And that's why, when I was in your church and I heard you preaching, and I saw how people reacted to you. People really engaged with you, and people express, this connection with you. I think because as you were talking to them, you make it real. You're talking to them, in a way that you can relate and connect with them, and having you and that stage to ask me to take off my shoes, crazy. I said, what this guy is gonna do to me? Try to baptize me? Was that annoying? Take off your shoes. Magid, take your shoes. And then here it is like Texan nice fancy boots. I really still have them. I enjoy them very much. But that is itself, like, there's one thing to preach, the other thing to demonstrate something to people by building relationship. And I thought about that moment, that when you asked me and gave me the shoes, I know that intentionally want to convey something also to me and to the audience, that you love me and you want to teach them love in action. That is speak louder than words. very creative.
There's something about the response, and it's what you're talking about, the responsibility of a cleric, of a pastor, imam, a rabbi, a priest, to challenge people. I mean, to influence them to righteousness, to goodness. And I think God has to change our heart. I remember I was maybe 31 years of age, and I'd preached about 3 times on a Sunday morning, and it was Sunday afternoon, and I was exhausted. And I came home, and I was laying on the couch, and the TV was on, and I woke up, and it was on PBS, and it was the civil rights series, Eye on the Prize. And so I'm waking up and I'm watching that, and I'm seeing, it shows Bull Connor, and he's there with the dogs, and it shows these African-American people being beaten, men and women and children, and the dogs after him. And I thought, man, that was horrible. I was thinking that was back in the 60s. And I'm watching this, and I'm going, that's sad. That was so wrong. And I thought, how could they do that? And I began to think, they're Southerners. I thought, man, I'm a Southerner. I thought, boy, we had that wrong. And then I began to think about how religious the South was. And I thought, how could religious people be out beating people because they're Black and they want civil rights? And then, Magid, I had an epiphany. It hit me. Those religious people that are beating the Black people, most of them are Southern Baptist, just like me. And I thought, oh my gosh, what am I a part of? Why did we do that? And all of a sudden it hit me. There weren't any racial issues. This was in the early 90s. But what hit me was, this is wrong. And I need to be more engaged and to speak out against. And so the pulpit, all of a sudden it hit me. How do I respond to that? How do I keep pushing us forward in how we see other people? But I'd heard this very famous pastor, our church was growing, and I started speaking at all these famous events. I won't tell you who, but you've seen the guy on TV. And he taught us, he said, whatever you do, don't speak about anything that's controversial. Because if you want your church to keep growing, you start talking about race or anything else, you'll mess it up. And I listened to him, Magid, and guess what? He was wrong. And I bought a lie. Because I think the responsibility that we have to change cultures, I think is big, Magid. I mean, it's like it's easy to preach, you sinners, you shouldn't be sleeping around, getting drunk or any of that stuff. That's easy. You need to clean your life up, be a better person. But I think there's another level of preaching and leadership that says, man, this is what it's like to live in a just society.
I really like what you're saying. But when I teach, I tell people there's 2 aspects of religion, inward and outward. Inward, it is where the change of the heart take place. And it's very easy to do outward religion. To show up in the mosque or show up in the church and you're thinking, reading the Quran or singing hallelujah. It's easy to do. That is that outward religion. The inward religion, when you clean your heart from envies, from hatred, from jealousy, from prejudice, that's the most difficult aspect of religion. Because other aspect of it is just, entertaining yourself, and just feeling good. Sometimes you don't even have get the guilt out. I check the box. I went to the church. I went to the mosque. But one of the things my grandfather used to say. That's amazing, man. He
was a tribal leader, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was highly respected in our village. He had this charisma, a very charismatic man. He used to say to me that, you can wear the biggest turban in the world and the biggest robe in the world and have the longest beard in the world, does not make you religious. Because sometimes you have this image of clergy, a big turban, long beard and so forth from the Muslim community. And he said, until and unless you clean that heart every night from hate of any human being, from any prejudice, from any jealousy, from any envy, grudge. He said, if you do that, then you can tell to God, now I'm connected with you. He said that, he said to me that if you are able to sleep every night with a light heart, you become a spiritual person.
Wow.
That's what he said to me. Therefore, I find it to be very interesting what you're saying, that very confusing religious people like myself. I see, people claim to be Muslims advocating for attacking Christians or, or committing terrorism. It is troubling to me. This is really like, when people talk about blasphemy, that's a blasphemy. That is really
good, Magid.
This is cult. It is just troubling to me. For the same thing that you have seen what happened in the South, I've seen now in some places that how can you be a true Muslim? You allow a church to be demolished. Yeah. How can be a true Muslim? You are chasing out Christian from your land. It's just contradictory. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right, Magid. I think one question I want to ask, which most listeners I think are interested in hearing as well, is the story of how you two met, an evangelical pastor and imam. Tell us that story about the first time you guys met.
Yeah, we met in Nepal. I remember that in the mountain of Nepal, and I remember that my hotel room was not that great. I don't know how it was.
Mine was good. They treated the Christians really good.
Or the white people. They treat white people better.
It's true.
Yes, and yeah, God bless you. I learned my lesson on that one. Yeah, but I think we met in Nepal with the group of Muslims from Pakistan and Christians, and the Muslims have Sunni and Shia, and because there's tension between Shia and Sunni and between the Muslims and the Christians, we're there to try to facilitate a dialogue and understanding between them.
And some of those Muslims weren't real nice.
Yeah, they had the history of really generating some conflict there.
Were you nervous about being with them?
No, I think as long as I'm a neutral land, I'm fine. but that was an interesting meeting, and I really learned a lot about how people can, establish relationship in a difficult time. But you and I said, like, we need to take it to the next level. We need to have some more time.
Boring, just say it. It was boring. I mean, you remember what they were doing?
I'm not
tell me it wasn't. You were sleeping half the time.
My friendship with those people.
I was kicking you under the table trying to keep you awake.
Oh, come on. Because maybe my room was too cold at night. I don't have but it was very interesting that really that you and I figured out, or we thought about it, that how can we make a sustainable relationship? Build it slowly, and instead of a more relationship based rather than lecture based. And that led to the first meeting of imams and pastors in Texas. Remember that when we came back, I facilitated flying the imam, while some pastors have more money than one pastor may have more money than all the mosque. Some of your pastors have private jet. Remember that.
I know.
But it was amazing experience. The fact that you made it, Bob, you made it fun, and you made it around building relationship, about horseback riding. The only thing that made me nervous, to be honest with you, the shooting thing.
It was fun.
No, it looked like a setup.
Dude, you're in Texas.
No.
Having
the imam
everybody a gun.
After 9/11, bringing the imam in Texas and have them to shooting, and you want to take a picture of shooting? I said no picture for the imam, because it looked like entrapment. entrapping them, you know. But that's really where the change have taken place, and I established great friendship with those
You know
pastors.
what was crazy is I'd gradually become friends with Muslims because of my work in Afghanistan and my work around the world, but I had never really done that much with Muslims in the U.S. And Prince Turki Al Faisal of Saudi Arabia is a friend, and he challenged me. He said, Bob, it's great what you do with Muslims around the world, but what about the U.S.? And I said, Your Highness, I live in Dallas. Me working with Muslims in Dallas would be like you starting a Baptist church in Mecca. It wouldn't go over real big. He started laughing. He said, yeah, but that's why you ought to do it. So that, you know, we picked the 12 cities. And I remember some of the pastors were very nervous about coming. I mean, they would not tell anyone. That still happens. Many times when we do our retreats today, pastors will say nothing until after it's over. And then they've shifted their whole mindset about how they see things. Hey, I want to ask you.
But Bob, you telling me always about the theology of loving thy neighbor and those kind of things. What do you think that what the challenges that we have in this issue that people who preach on Sunday, loving thy neighbor and so forth, will have this kind of fear of the neighbor? It's just troubling to me. It's the same thing about imams. Like, how comes people are not really challenging their interpretation of their theology by taking the courageous steps and being vulnerable and open up and reaching out to people? That's really.
I think it's easier to preach it than it is to live it. You know, and so, you know, for example, racism. It's great to say love your neighbor and red, yellow, black, and white. Jesus loves the little children of the world. But when we intentionally desegregated our church, that was something people could see. And it created headache. Great, Bob's working with Muslims around the world. But now we've got an imam. The most prominent imam in America is speaking at our church on Sunday. Has Bob lost his mind? He let him get up there and explain what Muslims believe. I think preaching is more than the words. It's the picture. It's the picture and how they see us living our lives. You know, Magid, I've seen this with you. Pastors are blown away when they meet you. They go, my gosh, that's an imam? Because you smile. You're like your dad. You're always grinning. You're always smiling. You're always having fun, you know? And when they see that, they go, wow. Hey, by the way, we were in Uzbekistan. Some of those pastors, their church has just been registered. It's a national.
Yeah, you told me that. I really am excited about this.
And that's because of Muslims. And so what happens when we build relationships with one another? Magid, have I ever told you about Jesus?
Of course you did.
Do you have any doubt in your mind that I would love to baptize you? Man, I do. I mean, I would.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, I know. But my point is, I've not compromised my faith. Yeah. But I said my faith is bigger than loving somebody that's just in my faith. Is my faith big enough? Here's another way we say it as Christian. Is Jesus big enough inside of me to love somebody outside my tribe? And I think that model has to be there. And you've done that to me. And so, you know, we were called the Muslim church. And I remember a staff member coming in one day, all upset. We've got to stop all this Muslim stuff. They're calling us the Muslim church. It's hurting us. You've been criticized. I mean,
there's something called moral imperative, and there's something called moral expediencies. Expediencies meaning that convenient moral, you know, that you have to be consistent, even in the most difficult time, to make the right decision, even if it upsets some people, but eventually those people are going to come around. Like, the question is this: what is the history of religion? How many people cheer and clap for Jesus when he started teaching in the beginning?
Not many.
Not many people. You know, people become his enemy. There's some people don't like him. The same thing with Prophet Muhammad. The same thing with Moses. Therefore, religion is not about having everyone sing Kumbaya. It's sometimes you have to challenge the status quo. You have to teach morality. You have to stand for what is right. Conveniency, it is not the teaching that of Jesus, of Moses, of Muhammad.
How do you handle the criticism? I mean, I tell pastors all the time, Google me, but if you got a question, ask me, because I don't even respond to all the criticism anymore. What about you, Magid?
What keep me going with all criticism that I hear, it's very interesting that sometimes you get criticism from the Muslim community. They think that you are too much into this interfaith and government relations. And sometimes you hear from the right wing, your tribe, calling me all kind of names. For you hear all of these kind of things, but what keep me going? When I read my scripture, Holy Quran, and I read about the challenges that people before us have faced, some of them the best of the best, closer to God than anyone else can imagine. And you say, if this is the path I'm taking, and I be true about it, then I have to expect hardship. I had to expect criticism. I had to expect that people are going to call me names and so forth. Have people called Jesus' name?
Yeah.
They did. Have people called Muhammad names? All of them. They called the righteous people being called names. Therefore, it is very important for all of us to say what we stand for. How can I identify myself? Who am I? What is my moral compass? What is my moral reference? What's my frame of reference of morality? That's what I need to think about. And then I'm going to say, I'm going to be friend of Bob. I'm going to be friend with Jewish leaders. I'm going to be friend with everybody. We can find a common ground in this beautiful country of the United States. Allow an immigrant like myself to have a chance to flourish, have relationship, have family, be able to practice his religion. But Bob, the reason that I advocate for Christians around the world, the Muslim community, to be protected is a matter of principle, not politics. Yeah. I believe my religion saying that I will become closer to God by protecting the Christians in Muslim country, but also is a matter of gratitude. I'm here, and the majority, with all the trouble of Islamophobia, negative things, is still I live in a country that is freedom of religion being granted by the Constitution. I can fight for my rights through the law, and I have to do the same for every Christian religious minorities in the majority Muslim countries. That's why we started this whole thing of the Marrakesh Declaration, Sheikh Bambaya. Therefore, this is my principle into this issue.
Magid, I have a dream and a desire and a hope, and it's this: that I start a lot of churches here in the U.S. and I train young pastors. But I dream of every young pastor that I train having an imam that they're as close to as I am to you. That's my dream. Because when that happens, Magid, then fear will go down. When that happens, then we can work together to build a society for everybody, not just people like that happens. When that happens, we can even have better conversations about our faith. I mean, think about it, Magid. So many pastors and imams, when we get them together, they really can't talk. This is what our faith teaches. They are so busy saying, no, we don't believe that. No, we don't believe that. I mean, on both sides, you hear that. Why? Yeah. Because Muslims, some imams have built this narrative that all the Christians are horrible. Some of the pastors have built the narrative that Muslims are horrible and they're evil and demonic. That's tragic. And it's even not biblical. Even if I disagree with faith, you disagree with my faith. We're both created in the image of God. We're sacred from God. Life is sacred. We can't do that.
Yeah, it's very interesting that we see now this multi-faith neighborhood that you and I established, co-founded, and you see the impact of it in many people's life. And I'm so happy that to go to this journey with you, that we see the change shift happening from city to city, where the imams and pastors becoming really close friends. They establish this relationship where they can call one another if something happened in their community. We have pastors who come and stood with the Muslims when the mosque was surrounded by extremist group, and you have this kind of development happening in America because of relationship. That's why I'm excited about this journey of touring America. Every single city that we need to have this friendship between imam and pastor and rabbi.
I've loved it, Majid. I love going around the world with you. I love watching you eat horse and monkey and other animals.
Hey. For the record, I did not eat horse. I did not eat monkey. Okay. You ate the horse. I don't know what your religion says. Actually, I feel shamed that that you ate horses and you're from Texas. You're supposed to be prohibited.
It's good.
Like it's supposed to be like prohibited for all the Christians in Texas to eat horses.
Listen, it's just like chicken. It's just like chicken.
No, but don't you see horses in Texas? Don't you feel bad?
Yeah, but I was eating a fat, ugly horse.
A cowboy.
Yeah,
Shame on you.
they were fat, ugly horses.
So bad for you betrayed your horses.
Hey, I have a quick question.
Yes.
So you talk about Multifaith Neighbors Network. What is your hope for the future and the work that you're doing together?
Well, that's a very good question. I think my hope is just what you just said earlier, that every imam and every pastor get to know one another, and we transform communities. My hope is that, the Dr. King has his dream, and it's still his dream not being completely realized, but we should have a dream as well. Our dream is to stand with one another in building community that compassionate, loving, and caring community. My dream is that my children will have no fear growing up in America, and my grandchildren will have a society where they don't hear an imam or a pastor or a rabbi preach hate. That's my dream. And in order to do that, we have to get into building true, genuine relationships.
So I would agree with that dream. I'm on board for that. I would just like to see it modeled in America and spread out to the ends of the earth. That's my dream.
Dreaming big, brother.
We're already seeing it in some countries. I want to see it all over the world with all religions. That's my dream.
Thank you for your dream, brother.
Yeah.
So for our listeners, what would you say is a first step in faith and action in the public square and getting involved, whether they're an evangelical Christian or a Muslim? What would be their first step?
Ignorance is the biggest source of fear. By knowing someone, you will eliminate or reduce the fear and the unknown. And to do that, you have to take the steps of being vulnerable, expose yourself to other people's culture, other people's religion, and that does not mean to water down your own religion. It will affirm your faith, because you have to do it from your faith perspective. You do it because you're Muslim, you do it because you are Christian. And that's really what we want to see happening.
One of the things Majid and I have learned, what changed pastors and imams, it's not information, it's relationships.
Which is transformation, yeah.
And so everybody can build a relationship with someone that's different. They can say, hey, let's eat together in the cafeteria today. Let's go grab a bite of lunch together. Let's talk. We're going to go out. Let's take our families to the park together. Because at the end of the day, that's the goal. The goal, Josh, is to get people connected. Because once you get to know someone, it changes you forever.
Absolutely. Amen.
Majid, I want to thank you so much for joining us. We got a long journey ahead of us, but we're going to make it. And Majid, it's going to be tough. People are going to give us a hard time, but dude, we're going to have some fun in the meantime. We can't stop the haters, but we can eat all the Bluebell ice cream we want. And we're going to do it, man.
Thank you so much, Bob. We shall overcome, as they have been said, and we walk together in this walk, this path of peace and building harmonious society. God bless you.
Thank you so much for joining us on this storytelling journey with Bob Roberts Jr. We are honored that you would listen, and we hope that you were impacted by the conversation. If so, we would love for you to download and subscribe to the podcast and share with others on social media. For more information on the podcast, show notes, or any references, you can go to bobrobertsjr.com, click podcast, and you can get all the information there. Thanks again for joining us, and remember, at the Bold Love Podcast, we want to encourage you to live out your faith boldly, better love your neighbor, and learn how to relate to others despite your differences without compromising your faith. Have a great day.